Hello everybody and welcome back to another stream. Today we're not going to be doing any OpenGL stuff. We're going to be looking into another programming challenge, and today we're going to be actually returning to Python. It's something that we haven't programmed in for a little bit, and we're going to be programming a web scraping algorithm. So what is web scraping? So if you a lot of sites will have their own sort of API, and we've looked at APIs. We looked at the SpaceX API, and those are designed to be read by computers and processed quickly. But some sites, like this site right here, PyPI, or the Python package installer, does not have an API, or at least not that I know of. But it does display all of its data on its website, and you can pass in parameters through the URL and stuff like that. So today we're going to be taking data from these HTML pages, and we're going to be kind of presenting it in a different format. So we're going to be all this data that's in this HTML page, we're going to kind of take it and put it into our program. So first thing we're going to do is we'll make sure you have Python installed, because I mean that's kind of I should probably update the title, or did I? Oh, it is updated. Okay. So make sure you have Python installed, and we're going to actually install this Python package that will allow us to process HTML without having to write so much code. So I'm going to go into my folder here, and I'm going to add a new file called main.py, and then I'm going to do my hello world. So if name is equal to main print hello world. All right, and then in here I'm going to do main.py. All right, prints it out. So now we're going to install our package, and we're going to be using a package called Beautiful Soup 4. And it essentially, like I said, is a quick screen scraping library, and it uses HTML code, and you can kind of traverse through it. It's kind of like an XML parser, but more tailored towards HTML. So first thing, so we have to install it. So it's just a simple command, pip install beautiful soup 4. All right, so it's downloading the packages. I can actually zoom in a little bit. There we go. That's a lot, but whatever. All right, so I just have to actually update pip as well. All right, so like I said, we're going to be taking data from the pip site, and we're going to be putting it into our program. So how are we going to do that? So there's two factors that we have to consider here. There's a couple of formats that we're going to have to go through, the URL and then the actual HTML format. So let's start with the URL. So we're only going to be looking at two kind of actions on the site, the searching and just the project description, project info. So right here, you see that I'm on a project page, and the specific URL format for this is a /project and then the name of the project. And then for search, it's going to be a /search, and then in the query you're going to pass in the term, and you can also pass in the order, relevance, created, stuff like that. So we're actually going to be storing this format in a JSON file. So I'm going to call this pip format.json, and this format is specifically tailored to this program. So we're essentially going to be building our program around this format. So first thing, I'm going to have a JSON dictionary as a kind of parent format, and I'm just going to have a URL element and then also a data element. So let's start with the URL. And I'm just going to be taking these from the JSON file in our Python project. So first thing I want to have in here is the domain. So domain, and that's just simply https://pypi.org. And then we're going to have a couple of actions. So actions will be project, and then also the search one. So for each action, there's going to be a route associated with it. So there's going to be the /project, and then there's going to be might be parameters. So stuff that's passed in the URL in the actual route, but then there also might be query terms like with the search. So we're going to start with just parameters. So for the project, the route is /project, and then the name is passed in as a route parameter. So I'm just going to format that using curly braces name, like that. And then down here, I'm going to say params for parameters, params, whatever you want to call it, name. So we're going to have a list of parameters down here, and then the route where we're going to plug in those parameters during runtime. All right, and then for search, we're going to have the route as just /search. And then we're not going to have any parameters, but we are going to have query values. So query here. And notice how this isn't uniform. So in our program, we're going to have to actually make this uniform by inserting query false and params false, stuff like that, into this structure here. But for now, we're just going to, just so we don't have too much clutter in the actual format file. All right, so for the query, we're going to have our term, and the term will have a title of Q. I'm just taking this from the site here, so it's just Q and O for the two things. And then there's also sort, which has a title of O, and for the sort, you can only have a couple of values. There's only a specified amount of values for it. And I'm going to put them down here in the format. So I'm going to say vals is a list. And weirdly enough, for the default one for sort by relevance, it's just an empty string. So we're just going to pass in an empty string there for relevance. And there's also -created and then -z-score. Oh, it's like I'm in stats again. God damn it. And then we're going to specify a default value. So default will be just an empty string, because that's what the default is. And then the last one is going to be page, because you can also specify the page number. So like page 3, and you see it passes in as a parameter up top. So page, the title of that parameter is page. So the reason why I'm not just putting the title up here is because it won't be as easy to read in code. It won't be as easy to pass in. It just looks a little better this way anyway. So yeah. All right. Now for the data, it's going to be a little different. So we're going to specify different data values for the project and the search as well. So they're going to be two different dictionaries there. So let me go to a project page. So here, I'm just going through the inspect element. I'm going through the actual HTML code here, and I'm finding the HTML, like the CSS select string of the actual actual data. So if to go into inspect element, you just have to do Control-Shift-C, or right-click and inspect element, and you see that for the title, for this beautiful soup name here, it's in an h1 and the class is package header name. So we can just call h1.packageheader name. The instructions to install are in a paragraph, in a p-element, but they're also in a span element. So we're going to want to get the span element inside of the paragraph element. There's also the release date, and then a brief description here. So we'll be doing those four things. So for the name, and I'm assigning a name to each select string so that you can kind of label what data is passed back and where. So we're going to say h1.package_header __ name. So I'm just taking this right from the inspect element. Then we have pip instructions. And that is, once again, in our paragraph element, and then in the span inside of that. And the reason why we're just taking the span is because there's extra text beyond that in this button here. So we don't want to get that. So we're going to say p.package-header __ pip -instructions. and then we're going to go into the next, into a child element, so with the greater than sign, and we're going to say span, and then the ID is pip dash command. So I'm using CSS selectors here, and Beautiful Soup 4 luckily has a function that allows you to search using CSS selectors. So that's a really helpful thing. And then the release date is simply just a p.package-header __ date. And then finally, the brief description, I'll call it, is div.package-description, and then greater than p.package-description. I'm slurring, summary, I'm not drunk, don't worry. All right, for the search, we're only gonna have two things. So let's just do, so we're gonna have page buttons here, so we might wanna know how many pages of elements are there. You might wanna pass that back into the actual program, so we're gonna say page btns, and this will be div.button dash group dash pagination, and once again I'm getting this straight from the inspect element. So that's, oh, we're in the search now. So that's these buttons down here. So now I'm going to introduce something that is not inside of the CSS selector elements, and that's, I'm going to add my own little syntax here. So let's say you want to get multiple elements. Unfortunately, there's not a default class for this 500 here for this last thing, which is unfortunate. But there are multiple elements. So what we can do is just kind of, we can get all the buttons and then go from the second to last one, and that will be the maximum number of pages. So what we're going to say is, to get all of the elements, we're going to use a star in front of the element. So we're going to say greater than star a dot button group __ button. So we're essentially just putting a star and in front of the CSS selector string, only for that element though. And what will happen is this will give us this will be a flag that we will program ourselves in the interpreter. All right, and then for the results, we're going to use another one of those. So we're going to say UL, and now I'm going to use this is part of CSS selecting. So this is square brackets area dash label is equal to search results, and make sure that search results is in single quotes. So all I'm doing here is I'm just getting the unordered list, and the only kind of attribute that gives it a certain, that people will be able to define it as a search results list, is this area label here. So we have to get this element right here using this attribute. And then we want to go into that list. So we want to get multiple of the list items here. So all of these list items. And we want to go into the list item and get the actual text from this link here. So what we're going to do is we're going to go greater than, and this will now give us all the list items, but then everything within each of those list items. So we're going to say a.package-snippet. I keep slurring my words, I'm sorry. It's kind of late. I started a little later than I wanted to, but okay. So there is one thing that we might want to do, and that is we might want to get something that isn't the text of an element. So you see that in this link, it gives the title, the description, all that stuff, but we might want to get the actual just link to it to go to the project itself. And that link is given in the actual the link element. So we can't get this through the text. So rather we're gonna have to say, oh, give me the href as well as the text. So we're going to specify that in curly braces and just saying href. And this is a custom thing that we will also program in ourselves. So yeah, this is, make sure you don't confuse this with the CSS attribute selector. So this square brackets where we say the search results, the area label, that's not the same as wanting this href. The square brackets are part of CSS, the curly braces are not, in the selector string at least. Okay, so now that we have our format, we can actually start writing some code. So in I'm going to go ahead and create a new file called HTML data parser. And this is going to be a little long. All right, so new file, HTML data parser.py. All right, I'm going to start with imports. So we're going to say from BS for import beautiful soup. So this is just importing the beautiful soup library. I'm also going to import requests because we're going to want to make HTTP requests to get HTML files. I'm also going to need import JSON and then import enum because we're going to need to have an enum for switches. And finally, I'm going to import the regex or the regular expression package, which is import RE. And the reason why is because we're gonna want to parse these strings efficiently. We're gonna want to use a regular expression string to kind of sort through and delete things, stuff like that. So the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna create our substitution class. So class regex selectors, and I'm just gonna store a couple of strings. So I'm just gonna say stores strings for general use in program. So the first one is going to be a bracket regex, and I'll leave that as a raw empty string. We're also going to have a brace regex. Okay, so if you don't know regular expressions, I'm just going to put these down, and then I'm also just going to put them in a demo just to show you how it's going to work. So for the bracket regex, we're going to say backslash, and this has to be the same as what I read here. So backslash and then open square brace, so your square bracket, dot, asterisk, a question mark, and then close square bracket. So what this does is it tells the compiler, oh, look for sections of the string that start with a square bracket, that close with a square bracket, and have some variable string in between. So let's paste this into, I don't think we're going to be using this, but it's just good for reference because it's going to be the exact same for let's just do the brace regex. So it's going to be open brace. Now we don't need the backslash because the square brackets are actually used in regular expression parsing. So you need to backslash it to make sure that it's escaped and just considered a normal bracket. And then for the brace regex, we're going to say open curly brace, dot, asterisk, question mark, close curly brace. Oh, yeah, open. Okay, so let's copy this and paste it into a demo real quick. So I'm just going to paste it right here. And let's go ahead and paste, oh, I just opened Visual Studio, that's not good. And I'm going to go ahead and paste this right here. So one of our data selection stuff. So you see that with this regular expression string, we have now selected the attributes that we want, the href from that link that we want along with the text. So we're going to be using this to kind of find where the person or the programmer wants an attribute from. Okay, so that's that. And then we're also going to have remove all white space characters, and this is going to be excluding the space. So it's going to be white space regex is equal to R for raw string, and then in two square brackets we're going to say backslash T, backslash N, backslash R, backslash F, and then backslash V. We're also going to have remove instances of at least two spaces. So that's going to be multiple space regex is equal to R, and then I'm going to specify the characters, so just a space, and then in curly braces I'm going to say 2 comma and then nothing after that, so at least 2 instances of this here. And then finally we're going to have left and right strip strings. So this is just going to strip spaces on the beginning or end. So we're going to say strip regex is equal to R, and then a caret for the beginning, and then space character, and then I'm going to put a plus after that to denote at like 1 or more, and then there's also the or that space character plus $sign. If you don't know what any of this means, that's too bad. But I did. No, don't leave, please. I put some links down below, and there's a thorough tutorial on how you can actually write this stuff. It's quite interesting, actually. Okay. Okay, so let's actually write our class now. So outside of so these are all static, essentially considered static variables because you can access them without having a member or an instance of the reject selectors class. All right, so we're going to say class HTML data parser. We're going to have our constructor, so def init. This will take in a self URL format and then also a data format. Pass there. We're going to have def process URL format. Takes in self and URL format. Pass there. We're going to say def. Ooh, I lost connection to my Streamlabs. Oh, that's going to be a rough one. Oh, okay. So. Alright, so def process data format, self and data format as parameters. We're going to say def construct URL, so we'll take in self action and then params, which is equal to false by default, and also query, which is equal to false by default. We're going to say def process data, self action and data as parameters, and then finally the def request method, which will do self action params is equal to false by default and query is equal to false by default, and that will be passed there. Okay. So let's just get started in the constructor. I kind of want to get this moving because it is 11 o'clock already, and we've only been live 20 minutes. Okay, so for the constructor, we're going to initialize our self variables for the URL and data format. So self.url format is equal to an empty dictionary, and same thing for the self.data format. And then we're going to process each of the formats. So we're going to say self.process URL format and pass in URL format, and self.process data format and pass in data format. All right, that's as simple as that. And we'll be initializing this class using the formats in this JSON file. So that's why we have this JSON file outside of the main class. All right, so let's start with the process URL format. This should not be too much. We're essentially just going to use this to kind of standardize the format for each of the actions and elements in there. So we're going to say, first we're going to actually add the flexibility to pass in a string to a JSON file. So let's say that the JSON file had only the URL format in it, then we could just pass in that string and it's going to read it here. So we're going to say if type of URL format is str, so it's a file path, so read file. So we're going to say self URL format is equal to json.load, and then we're going to say open self or URL format. And otherwise, we're going to say just self.url format is equal to URL format. So is pre-compiled dictionary. Okay, so now we know it's in JSON format. No matter what you pass in, we know it's a JSON format. Okay, so next what we're going to do is we're going to go through each action. So for action in self.url format actions. So we're going to say for each action, we're just going to be giving we're just going to be filling in the empty values. So fill in empty or non-existent values for params and query. So first we're going to say if query in self.url format at actions at action at if the key exists, that means that there's something in that the query that we have specified it. So we're going to say for query in self.url format at actions at action at query. This is just a lot. We're going to give it values. So if not all of the queries will have these vals in default with assigned to it, so we're essentially going to just pass in false for this, just so we don't have to say, oh, if vals in sort. We just want to say if sort vals is true or false, just to make it a little more coherent. So we're going to say if vals not in self.url format at actions at action at query, we're going to say self.url format at actions. I completely understand if this is very hard to follow. Just type what's on the screen though. At action at query at vals, now a string, is equal to false. So we're essentially just giving it a value right now. And then we're going to do the same thing for default as well. So if vals, or if default not in self.url format at actions at action at query, self.url format at actions, son of a bitch, at action at query at default is equal to false. So if you were wondering what this for loop, I'll just start from the top if you're not too familiar with Python. In this for loop, we're essentially saying iterate through each key in URL format at actions at action at query. So iterate through each query value. And then we're saying if the query does not have a vals attribute or a vals key, assign false to it, and the same thing for default. And then otherwise, we're going to say, so go back to the initial for loop, we're going to say else. So if the query is not, we're going to say self.url format at actions at action at query is equal to false. Oh, I messed up here. Let me just make sure I'm doing this right. Make sure that you put query, like the string query, before the value query here. All right, so this is really confusing. All right, so in the for loop, we're going for each action that we specify in the URL format. We're going to say if the query value exists, or let's start, if it doesn't exist, we're going to just say false. But if it does exist, we're going to iterate through each query value. And if vals is not in that query value, we're going to give that a false. Make sure that your tree is traversed properly. And then the same thing for default. So if default is not a key, we're just going to set default to false. Ooh, and I forgot that. Okay. All right. And then outside of the query, we're just going to do the same thing for the params as well. So if we don't give it parameters, we're just going to set them to false. So if params not in self.url format at actions at action, self.url format at actions at action is at params is equal to false. Okay. And I think this is actually going to be so that's the only instance of where we're going through like 15 dictionaries. I trust me. That this is the only time we're doing that. I can actually open this file on the side here if you want to take a look. Oh, That's not gonna work, is it? No. Okay. So yeah, this is, I might just want to put this in a paste bin, to be honest. Like, this is just, you know, I'm gonna put this in a paste bin real quick. I'm just gonna copy and paste this. So we're gonna say paste bin. I'm gonna put this in here. Syntax highlighting, Python. Let's say URL format for a loop. All right, so I'm gonna create the paste. And then now let me put this in the description of the video. Give me half a second. Let me just go ahead and, there we go, okay. So URL format for loop paste bin. All right. So now the link to that paste bin, if you didn't get all the code or if you want to check it, god damn it, hold on. Can't copy the bullet point. There we go, okay. So it's saved now. So if you want to go in the description and just find that, that should be relatively simple. Okay, let's get back to the code. Let me make sure I'm back in desktop. Okay, so this should make sense now. All right, now let's go into the data format. All right, so here, now let me actually just, okay, whatever. All right, so let's go into the data format now. So this is going to be a thick method. I won't lie, it's a little, but it shouldn't be too hard to understand. So we're going to do the same thing with the kind of the file. If you pass in a file name, we're essentially going to do the same thing. So I'm actually just going to copy and paste, and I'll obviously forget something. So if type of data format is string, just the self.data format is going to be json.load open data format the file, and otherwise it's a precompiled dictionary, so we're going to say self.data format is equal to data format. All right, so once again, we now know that it is in JSON format. All right, so we're going to do the same thing. So we're going to go ahead and for action in self.data format. So here, what we're saying is for each action in the data format, so we have our project and our search. We're essentially going to, the way I'm going to try and do this is we're going to process each element. So we're going to separate the elements by the greater than sign, and then we're going to kind of create a top-down list starting at the top. Now the reason why is because, like with this list element here, this isn't the last element, so we can't just say, oh, get multiple of the data elements, because if we get the first list element and then here, that's not going to work. So we're going to want to get the multiple list elements and then from there get the link elements. So we're going to say for each action, we're going to go ahead and we're going to process each element in a separated select string and then create a top-down element list, or tree rather. All right, so first we're going to say for key in self.data format at action. We're going to say self.data format at action at key is equal to, so now we're going to be replacing, hold on, let me just make sure I'm doing this right. Yeah, so we're just going to be substituting in, well, first we're just going to want to clean it up and get rid of the spaces in between here and here, so these two right here, just around the greater than sign. So we're going to say re.sub, and then I'm going to give it a raw string, so there's going to be 3 possibilities. And you can specify groups in regular expression strings. using parentheses. So we're going to say if there's a space on either side, on both sides, there's a space on the left side, or there's a space on the right side. And then we're going to say replace that with just a single greater than sign. And then finally, self.data format at action at key. So essentially what this line is saying is, for each of these instances that you find, replace it, or for each of the instances that you find in the key, replace it with this. I can actually show you how that looks in this demo. So right there, and you see that it finds that there are two instances of it where there's spaces, and I can also delete one of the spaces and it won't affect it. It'll be the exact same. Okay, so we're just getting rid of the spaces around them. And then now what we're going to do is we're going to create a list of elements. So elements is equal to an empty list, and we're going to say select strs is equal to re.split. So now we're using another regular expression method that will split a string based on our regular expression string. So we're just going to split it across the greater than sign. So, and we know that it's only going to be this without any spaces because we replaced those with a single one. And we're going to split the instances in self.data format at action at key. All right, and then we're going to say for I in range, the length of select strs. So now we're going to go ahead and use a method that we will create. So we're going to say elements.insert. So we're inserting an element into the front of the list, and we're going to use a function called process select str, and we're going to write that in half a second, and we're going to pass in select strings at I, and then we're also going to pass in a parameter I is equal to len select strs -1. So I is equal to the length of the string -1. And the reason why we want to do this is because this is going to tell the program whether or not to process the attributes. So if it isn't the last string, we're not going to want to actually just look for these attributes and waste processing power. So that's just going to be conditional there. So the attributes will only be available for the last element in the list. All right, so let's actually write this element or this function right now. So I'll just leave that up there. You know, let's just finish this method and then we'll write this method. And we're going to finish the process data format method, and then we will write the process select string method. All right, so once we have all the elements and they're going to be in a specific format, we're going to now construct the top-down list. So we're going to say previous element is equal to false, and we're going to say for element in elements, if previous element at child is equal to previous element, and then previous element is equal to element. So what is this mumbo jumbo? Did I just say the name of a YouTuber? What does this mean? Well, what we're going to do is with our list, we essentially have, you know, let me let me demo this out for you. So let's take this right here. So this thing right here. And our select strings are now those three things right there. So what happens is this is the first element that we process, and that will get put into the back of the list. This will get put in front of that, and the link element will get put in front of that. So essentially it's going to be the lowest child first, and then the parent of that, and then the parent of that. So essentially the previous element will be the child of the current element in these iterations here. However, if there are not multiple elements, previous element will just be false. So element will never have a child on it. So that's kind of my thought process there. Okay. And then after this for loop, we're going to want to say self.dataFormat at action at key is equal to previous element. All right, it's as simple as that. All right, so now let's write this actual process select string method. So this is also going to be a little doozy. It's going to be a lot of conditionals, and it's also going to be really annoying too. All right, so above the class, I'm going to say def process select string, and we're going to say string and process attrs is equal to false. So this is where that Boolean statement that we wrote will be passed in. All right, before this, we're going to create our enum. So we're going to say class token type, and this extends from enum.enum. And in here, we're going to have tag is equal to 0, so the element tag, class underscore, because class is a reserved word, is equal to 1, and then ID is equal to 2. So we're just going to use this to specify which kind of, what token type we're on, because we're going to be going through each of the, each character in the select string. Okay, so we're first going to have our, here, let's kind of outline this. So in the function, we're going to take in something that looks like a tag. We're going to have selector 1, selector 2, ... So these are our CSS selector attributes. And then we're also going to have in the curly braces the attributes that we want. So attr1, ... And then we're going to have a .class1, .class2, and then finally a hashtag ID. So we're going to have to process each of these elements here. And we're going to do that by just going through each character and end up classifying it by its thing, by whether or not it's a tag, class, or ID. All right, so we're going to create our ret is equal to a dictionary with tag is nothing. The class is an empty string, is an empty list, and then ID is an empty string. We're actually not going to be using the class and ID right now, so I'm probably just, no, I can't skip that yet. But we may use that if we want to remove our dependency from the Beautiful Soup package itself. All right, so first we're going to say obtain multiple is equal to false. So remember that little asterisk that you put on here? We're going to need to detect if that is actually there. So we're going to say if str at 0 is equal to an asterisk, obtain multiple is equal to true, and then we're going to want to remove that asterisk from the string because it's not involved in the actual CSS selector string. So we're going to say str is equal to str from 1 to the end. And then here we're going to say ret at obtain multiple is equal to false. You know, we can just put this, we can kind of just do this right here. So obtain multiple is equal to true, but by default, obtain multiple will be equal to false. Okay. Now we're going to go through the attributes and the types and the tokens and all that stuff. So we're going to say current, I'll say token, or not token, current section is equal to an empty string. We're going to say current type is equal to token type dot tag. No, I'm defaulting this a tag because the tag will always come first in a CSS selector string. So we're going to say for C in str. So for each character in the string, we're going to say if C in the dot or hashtag. So if it's either a dot or a hashtag, we're going to know that it's the end of the section. And we're going to start a new one. So we're going to say if current type is equal to token type dot tag, ret at tag is equal to current section. Else if current type is equal to token type dot class, ret at tag is equal to, or ret at class rather. And we're going to say dot append because it's a list. Current section. And then finally, else it will be an ID. So we're going to say ret at ID is equal to current at current section. All right, so we're gonna set in variable, and then now we're gonna want to reclassify. So we're gonna want to reset the type. So we're gonna say if C is equal to a dot, we're gonna know that the next section will be a class. So current type is equal to token type dot class, and else current type is equal to an ID, so is equal to token type dot ID. Now the reason why we know it can only be a class or an ID is because we already know that C is either a dot or a hashtag, so it can only be a dot. If it's not a dot, then it has to be a hashtag. Okay, and then we want to reset the actual section, so we're going to say current section is equal to an empty string, and otherwise, if it's not in that, if it's not a dot or a hashtag, we're going to say current section plus equals C. So we're going to want to add that character to the section itself. Okay. The one fault with this is that it doesn't actually process the last type or the last section, because the last character isn't going to be a hashtag. It's not going to be a class. It's just going to be the end of the string. So we're going to have an extra element that hasn't been kind of set yet. So we're going to say, so after the for loop, we're going to say last section. So we're going to say if current type is equal to token type dot tag. It's essentially going to be the same thing up here. So you can copy and paste this same if statement and just put it down here, and then just indent it properly. Yeah, and there's no errors there. All right. Now finally, we're going to get the target attributes. So get target attributes, and I say target because we want to get the href in this thing right here. So we want to, that's kind of our target data there. So we're going to say if process ATRs, and remember that's a parameter that we pass in here, so it's a Boolean true or false. So if process attrs, we're going to say attrs search, so the search of the attributes is equal to RE, so regular expression dot search. We're going to say rejects selectors dot brace rejects. So we're going to be finding all instances where braces enclose a section, and then comma ret tag, just like that. So the tag will have the curly braces. So this is going to be the entire tag from this kind of processing right here. This will be in the entire tag. And the reason why is because it hasn't found a class yet or anything. So we're going to say if process attributes, and after the search, we're going to say if ATTRs search, so if the search returns something, we're going to say ATTRs is equal to ret at tag at ATTRs search dot start at 0. So I'm gonna explain the syntax in a second. +1 to ATTRs search dot end at 0 -1. So what this means is the re.search will return a match class, and that match class will have a function called start where we pass in the group, and because there's only one match that we know of, we're just going to get the 0th group essentially, and we don't want the braces though, because we're going to want to separate that after. Let me just check this text real quick. So we're going 1 from the start of the braces, so we don't want the braces, and then 1 before the end of the braces. Okay. Next we're going to be just removing the braces from it. So we're going to say ret at tag is now equal to ret at tag, and we're going to take a substring from 0 to attr search dot start 0, and then we're going to go from this little section, so from the start of the string to the start of the match, and then we're going to say plus ret at tag from the end of the match to the end of the string. All right, and now we want to add we want to separate the string by its attributes, because you might want an href, a target, something like that. So we're going to say attr's is equal to re.sub, and we're going to substitute in we're going to just get rid of all the spaces. So you just say that by doing a square braces with a space in between, and that looks for all instances of a space. And then we're going to replace that with just, or we can actually just say re.sub, or no, just keep it as space for now. And then we're going to say replace it with nothing, and then attrs. So replace it with nothing from attrs. And then finally, we're gonna split it up. So ret at attrs is equal to re.split, and we're gonna split from the we're going to split around the commas, because we're going to separate the attributes by comma. So we're just going to put a comma in square brackets for the regular expression string, and then we're going to replace those in attrs. And then finally, we're going to we're going to get rid of this thing in the select string as well, because we want to return the select string of the element itself, so that the beautiful soup can actually find it. So we're going to say ret at select str is equal to str from 0 to attr's search dot start at 0. So this is kind of like the tag, and then we're going to say plus str from attr's search dot end at 0 to the end of the string str. Okay. Now if attrs searched returned none, it's going to be false. So else, we're just going to say ret at attrs is equal to false, and then ret at select str is equal to str, and then otherwise, so if process attrs was false, we're going to say else, then ret at select str is equal to str. Okay, and then at the end of the method, we just want to return ret. All right, so that's the process select string, and we have now processed both of the formats, the URL and the data formats, and now we can actually get into the constructing the data. I'm going to actually get some water real quick because I already ran out. I'll be right back. All right, I'm back. Okay. So this next method, or damn it, the next two methods are kind of thick as well. But we get to end it out with a nice short one. So just look forward to that. Okay, so for construct URL, we're going to have three kind of phases. Well, first thing is we're going to have a termination condition. So if action not in self.url format at action. So if it's just not an action, we're just going to return false. All right. So now we're actually going to go through three stages. So to construct a URL, we're going to say construct URL. So we're going to get the domain first. Then we're going to fill in parameters. So get the domain and route actually. And then we're going to add the query values. Okay. So easy enough. We'll start with the domain. So we're going to say URL is equal to self.url format at domain. So we're just going to get the base domain. Next, we're going to get our parameters. So we're going to say route is equal to self.url format at actions at action at route. So we're essentially going into the actions list, we're getting the desired action, and we're getting the route values from that. Or getting the route, the base route itself. And now we want to plug in the actual parameters that we passed in. So we're going to say if params in self.url format at actions at action. So if there are parameters in here, oh no, sorry, we actually programmed around this because we gave it a uniform thing. So we're just going to say if self.url format at actions at action at params, that will be a false or a dictionary. So if something comes up, it's going to return true. So we're going to say for param in self.url format at actions at action at params. So for each parameter title, we're going to say param string is equal to a curly brace, so how we formatted it in the URL. So we just surrounded each parameter using a using curly braces. So we're going to say the open curly brace plus param plus a closed curly brace. So we're essentially just getting the string, the section of the route that represented the parameter. And then we're going to say route is equal to re.sub. So we're just substituting in param string. So wherever we find an instance of param string, in params at param, and we're going to substitute it in with the actual passed in parameter, and we're going to substitute it in route. So we're going in the string route, find all instances of param string and replace it with params at param or the passed in param. And finally, we're just going to say URL plus equals route. And this default thing here was there if parameters returned false. Okay, and now we're going to do the query, which is going to be a little annoying. All right, because we're going to have to do default values and stuff like that, and it's not going to be the cleanest. So query. So we're first going to say if self.url format at actions at action at query. So if that returns true, we're going to say query string is equal to an empty string as a placeholder for now. And next we're going to go through each query parameter in the URL format. So we're going to say for query param in self.url format at actions at action at query. So for each query parameter, we're going to say valid is equal to false. And then we're going to want to get the title of it. So we're going to say title is equal to self.url format at actions at action at query. This is the longest string, by the way, of going through a tree. At query param at vals, right? Oh, no, I'm sorry, no. Oh, at title. Okay. So we're just giving it the default title that it has, because remember that the title of the query in the format is not the same as the title in the URL itself. Okay. Next we're going to say if query, so if query actually exists, and query param in query. So if the query, if the passed in query exists, and if that has query param in it, we're going to say if self.url format at actions, son of a bitch, at action at query param at vals. Hold on, let me just take care of this real quick. Let me just send a text real quick. All right. Okay, so if the vals, if there are like default, or if there's a constrained set of values, wait, did I do this right? No, I didn't. This if statement should read if query at query param in, so if it's in there. So this means that if the pass in query value is in the constrained, if it's in the constrained values. Oh wait, no, I did have it right the first time. I'm sorry. So if the values exist, so if there is a list of constrained values, next we're going to say if query at query param in that. So if it's in there, we're going to say valid is equal to true. Now, go out a statement. We're going to say else. So if the values don't exist, so if there are no constrained values, there's no specified value, we're going to say valid is equal to true as well, because it doesn't actually just want anything. And then after that, so go out one more. So if the query either doesn't exist or hold on, if oh, okay, I got it. So if the query doesn't exist, or if the query parameter is not in there, we're going to say else, and then if there's no, and then we're going to test to see if there's a default value. So if not self.url format at actions at action, I swear to God, I'm going to get an error on this, at query param at default. So if the default value doesn't exist, we're just going to say continue. So we don't want to actually add anything for the thing because it's not a required parameter. Okay. Okay, so now we can go back into the for loop. This is just the messiest if statement I've ever written before. So in the for loop, we're going to say if valid, we're just going to add the value. So we're going to say query string plus equals title plus, and then an equals sign, and then plus str, and we're going to convert the query parameter to a string. So we're saying str of query at query parameter. And otherwise, if it wasn't valid, we're just going to use the default value. So use default value. So we're going to say query string is equal to title. Oh, query string plus equals title plus the equal sign, plus the string value of self.url format at actions at action at query param at default. I think I might put this on myself with the complexity of the actual format that I gave it. Okay. And then after that, we want to put the ampersand after, just because that's how you separate different parameters. So we're going to say query string plus equals the ampersand character. And at the end, this is actually going to give us an extra. So outside of the for loop, we're going to say if query string does not equal an empty string, we're going to say URL plus equals a question mark plus query string from 0 to the length of the query string -1, just to remove that extra ampersand. So remove last ampersand. All right, so that's the building the URL, and then don't forget to return the URL. So when I was testing this, I forgot to return the URL, and it kind of screwed me, and I didn't really enjoy that, but no, it's okay. Okay, now let's actually go ahead and do our process data method. No, I'm actually gonna go take a tinkle, just so I don't pee my pants during stream. That would be embarrassing. I'll be right back. Don't worry, boys, I'm back. God damn, it's already been an hour. All right, let's blast through this. Okay. So for process data, we're going to take in a string, which is an HTML string. So it's going to be straight from the HTML file. So now it's going to be where we're going to use our beautiful soup library. So we're going to say soup, not the soup store, is equal to beautiful soup add data, or pass in data, and then the type, which will be html.parser. Okay. So now I'm gonna give you a little peek at what the return format will be. This is a good one. So we're gonna say return format. So we're gonna return a dictionary, which has our key 1, and this will map to text, which is the text, and then attr1, which will give us our attr1, and so on. So that's going to be where we put our href and stuff like that. And now if we say key 2 and we want to obtain multiple, we're going to say it's going to be an array this time of the same elements. So of elements. So we're an array, and then we'll have dictionaries in between that have text, and so on, attr, and stuff like that. Okay, so we're gonna have a placeholder for the return. So ret is equal to that, and then before I forget, I'm just gonna add a return ret at the end there, just so I don't forget. Now in here, we're gonna have our for loop. So for key in self.data format at action. So for each key in the data thing, so for each key here, so name, pip instructions, release date, and brief. So for each one of those, we're going to say for each key, we're going to want to traverse down the tree. So the traverse down the tree that we created using the children in the format. So if you remember, we set the child right here. So we're going to traverse down. We're going to select elements using select string, and then we're going to determine if attributes. All right, so let's start. So select is equal to self.data format at action at key. So we're just getting the base select key. I think that's. Yeah, that's right. Okay. So we're just getting the dictionary that has the children, the classes, and the select string. And we're going to say elements is equal to an array of that has soup initially. So soup is like the parent of everything. I would love if someone just came in here and listened to me say that out of context. Soup is our god here because soup holds the root HTML element. And we're going to be essentially traversing down from that. The select strings will select from the parent soup. God, I love saying that, the parent soup. And then we're also going to have a placeholder for attributes. So we're going to say attrs is equal to false. So now we're going to go into another loop. We're going to say while true, new elements is equal to an empty array. We're going to say for el in elements, if el, we're going to say if select obtain multiple, we're going to get all instances. So obtain multiple will be specified if we put the star there, the asterisk. We're going to say new elements dot extend. This is how you add a list onto a list, not just the list to the list. We're going to say el.select, and we're going to get the select string from the select element. So select at select str. This is hard to say. Just once again, type what's on the screen. Don't listen to what I say. And then otherwise, we're going to get the first instance. So we're going to say res for result is equal to el.select select at select str. Or you know what we can do? We can just say res is equal to select at el.select using select, the select string up top like that, and then just pass in that res to extend, and then also here new if res new elements dot append res at 0. So essentially what this is doing is we're getting the select results, and then if we want multiple, we're gonna add all of the elements. Otherwise we're just going to append the first one in the list if it exists. Okay, and then next we're going to reset the elements for the next iteration. So use the elements in the next iteration. So this is kind of confusing, but the way, so I'm gonna try and diagram out how this works. So let's say in our first iteration we have our soup, right? So this is soup right there. Now let's say we select a single paragraph element. So this is going to go down and we're going to select a P, and let's just say just P like that. And we don't want multiple. So this becomes the new elements list. And then in the next iteration, we're making the new elements list into the soup. So the soup, this elements list now just becomes the P, because we're in the next level now. We're going one level down the tree. And then now let's say that we want to get multiple attributes within the P. And well, let's say we're going to have span 1, span 2, ... So it's going to be a list. Now, if we go even further, we're going to say span 1A, span 1A2, span 2A, span 2A2, ... So we're essentially just getting every element and every instance of every element if we want it. So this span 1 element, if we wanted to get 2 links from that, we're going to use this span 1 element and select 2 things from it and add them to the list. Okay? So that's how that's going to work. Obviously, this structure doesn't really make too much sense, but it's just used as a demo. Okay, so to say that, we're just going to say elements is equal to new elements. Okay, next we're going to say determine if need attributes. So if ATTRs in select, ATTRs is equal to select at ATTRs. So we're saying if the key is in select, we want to just set the value of ATTRs of this placeholder up here to whatever we specify. And once again, this value right here is determined in process element if we find curly braces or not. All right, let me just find, yeah, all right, we're back here. Okay, and then next we're going to say if child exists, go down tree else break. So if child in select, select is equal to select at child, and otherwise end of tree. End of tree, so we're going to say break. All right, I'm still getting, syntax. Okay. What? I'm still getting, okay, whatever. All right, so now we're going to get out of this while true loop. And we're going to now take the data from the elements. So we're going to say take data from elements. So we're going to say if the length of elements is equal to 1, we only have one element, so only one element. And we're going to say ret at key is equal to process element data, and we're going to write this function. We're going to pass in elements at 0 and attributes. And otherwise, there's multiple elements. So else elif len at elements is greater than 1. We're going to return the list. So ret at key is equal to an empty list, and we're going to say for L in elements, ret at key dot append process element data using L and attributes. So we're going to process each element separately and add them to the list. And then else, we're just going to return false, because we didn't find anything. Okay. Now, that is good. So let's write this process element data for this function, and then we're going to do the last function, which will be short. Okay, so above the reject selectors class, I'm going to say, let me just find my reference. All right, this function is going to be really quick, actually. So we're going to say def process element data, and we pass an element and attributes. So the return format is going to be something like this. So it's just going to be, oops. We're just going to return the text, which is just the text, and then now our attributes. So attr1, attr1, and ... So that we're just going to return the text and the attributes separately. All right. So first we're going to do ret is equal to And the text will be clean text, and we're going to write this method too. So clean text and pass an element.text. Element.text is from Beautiful Soup 4, so we're just taking the text from the element. And notice, you will notice that in Beautiful Soup 4, the .text actually includes all of the child elements as well. Okay, next we're going to say if attr, so if attributes, we're going to say for attribute in attrs, ret at attr is equal to element.get attribute. So we're just going to get the attribute from the element and set it in the return. And then finally, we're going to return ret. Now let's write this clean text method. Pretty simple. So def clean text. Text, it's just going to be a bunch of regular expression stuff. So we're going to say text is equal to re.sub. We're going to regex selectors dot white space regex, and we're going to substitute that with just a single space. So we're going to replace all white space characters, the tabs, the new lines, with just a space, and then we're going to pass in text there. So replace all with spaces. Next, we're going to say text is equal to re.sub regex selectors dot multiple space regex, and we're going to replace all instances of multiple spaces with just a single space. So replace greater than or equal to 2 spaces with 1, and then finally text is equal to re.sub, and we're just going to strip it. So regex selectors dot strip regex, not strip teases, just a strip regex, and we're just going to replace that with an empty string and then text. So strip text, and then finally we're just going to say return text. Okay, so we have written all of the code. Now we're going to connect all the code together in def request. So this final method, after 330 lines of code, just amazing. What's the problem? Did I forget something? What did I screw up? It's getting a syntax error. Ret undefined variable at. Where do I say? Alright, I think that's just screwing up. It's just a bunch of baloney. Alright, and then I don't know what's going on here. I guess it'll tell us when we compile it, but that's good for now. Okay, so for a request, it's pretty simple. Alright, so we're going to say URL is equal to self.construct URL. We're going to pass in actions, or action, params, and query. If URL, so if the URL actually got something, we're going to say data is equal to requests.get URL. So we're using our requests library now. All this does is it retrieves the HTML file from the specified URL. And then finally, we're going to say return self.processData, pass an action and data.content, and then else we're going to return false. All right, and we can also print out the URL just to make sure it's all right. Okay. Oops, don't want to do that. Hold on. Okay, now finally let's go back into our main class, and we're going to actually implement this. This is exciting. Oh god, this is so exciting. And we didn't even, what time are we at? Oh, I just closed out of that. Hour and 24 minutes? Can we beat the album? Okay, I hope we can. We have about 10 minutes. All right, let's do it. Oh, I can't see. All right, so if name, or let's first import our class. So we're gonna go ahead and say from HTML data parser, import HTML data parser. So I'm just saying from the Python file here, import the HTML data parser class. All right, and then we also want to import JSON. Oops. All right, so let's go in and get started. So we're going to say formats is equal to json.load, and we're going to load and open a string pip format.json. So we're going to open the file here, and then we're going to say data is equal to HTML data parser. We're going to pass in formats at URL, and remember these are all in one file. So we're going to say this is the URL format, and this is the data format. So we're going to pass them separately. So formats at URL, and then also formats at JSON. Okay. God, this is exciting. Okay, let's start with our search terms. So while true, we're going to say search is equal to input search term. And we're going to say if search is equal to stop break. That just stops the infinite loop. And then we're going to say result is equal to data.request. We're going to pass in search, and then we don't want to pass any parameters, but we do want to pass in a query. And we're going to say query is equal to, and the term, remember I'm using the same name right here, so the term is here, so term, and we'll pass in some value, which will be search. And then we want to print out the results. Okay, now let's, okay, so let's run this. Py main.py. Okay, okay, yeah, there was my syntax error of the day. I didn't put an equals equals. Okay, now let's do this. Nope. Key error JSON, okay. It's formats at data, not JSON. I just screwed that up. Oh God. Okay, let's all right, so our search results, I just searched up project. So I'll search that up again. Fuck. Key error action. Oh, once again, I knew I would get all these key errors here. What was that line 230? Actions. Okay. Oh, fuck. Oh, of course, I forgot. I misspelled select string. Yes! Yes, it worked. Oh my God. Okay. Okay, so let's look through this. So I'm going to copy and paste this data into another JSON file. So data.json. And I'm going to replace all of the single quotes with double quotes so it can format. Okay. All right, so let's look at this. So we have our page buttons, and it returns an array, previous 2, 3, 500. And what we'll do is we'll get the second and last, and that will be the maximum number. And then for our results, we have project 2, this ID, and then we have this outlier. Let's check that against there. Oh, it came right here, but it had a new line for some reason. Okay, I guess it probably alphabetized some. It's somewhere. Okay, so project 2, we get the link to it, and then we also get the. Oh, this is just formatted wrong. Okay, no, that's fine. Although it didn't get rid of the new line. Well, here, let's see. Is there a new line in here? Okay, it looks fine though. That's okay. Oh, that slash, or no, it's fine. It's okay. Okay, so the data is read. Now let's try the other side. So I'm just going to click stop, and then now let's try and search up a package. So I'll just say data.request project, and then we'll say query, and we're going to say params is equal to, and what did we say? It's just the name. Name. All right, so let's clear this, and we'll say beautiful soup 4. Okay, good. So we get beautiful soup 4, 4.9.1, pip instructions, we get the instruction or the install command, and then the release date, which is release, and then brief screen scraping library. I want to curse, but I'm gonna try and fuck whatever. I'm gonna curse. Fuck yes, we did it. We fucking did it. That's fucking right. That was quite the doozy. God damn. That was a lot. But how long was this file? 334 lines? Not bad. Not bad. That's pretty good for 1.5 hours. So I enjoyed that. That was fun. And we beat the album, which is nice. So anyway, just to recap, we built a web scraping library that allows us to take data from HTML pages where it would not be available in a JSON format or in another API format. So essentially, yeah, you can go ahead and use this on any site you want that has data. I was using this to create a course database for my college, actually, because they don't have like an API or anything. I wouldn't expect a college to, but I just created it so that I could look up courses quickly and I could see prerequisites, stuff like that. So that's kind of fun. Yeah, interesting stuff. I might come back on Thursday with another programming tutorial on continuing the Octree in OpenGL, but I don't know, depending on how much code I write. But if not, I will probably just play a game or something. It's been a while since I've done that. But anyway, until then, I will, who knows? And I will, yeah, that's about it. I will see you guys on Thursday. Bye.